Hello everyone, my name is Lorenzo, I'm also known as Magommo on Reddit, and I'm bringing you this tutorial on how to make work of the adapter PCBs that adapt the new kind and smaller kind of thumbsticks to the old Xbox 360 PCBs, controller PCBs of course. Just a disclaimer before we begin. If you have the original potentiometers, you don't have to do this mod, because if you have the original potentiometers and they show drift, you can easily take this part right here, unmount it from the assembly, and mount back some new potentiometers, so that you don't have to rely on cheap Alibaba or AliExpress replacements. And this is the adapter. As you can see, this is the revised version, and the prototype that you'll be able to download has already a lot of problems fixed. Problems of the original version that, as you can see, matter only when mounting this PCB on the controller. As you can see, I've cut this part so that it won't be an issue to fit the PCB under the upper part of the controller, and this is what you'll be able to make after this tutorial. This is the new kind of thumbstick adapted to fit on old Xbox 360 PCBs. So, to do this, what will you have to get? Of course, one of these PCBs. Normally they only accept 5 or more PCBs to print or make, so you'll have probably to order 5 or more. But if you use the PCB websites discount codes for new accounts, you will be able to get these PCBs for under $10. In my case, I've managed to get this for only $6. And you'll also need a soldering iron, of course, with a small tip to really get in the tiny spaces that result from building these PCBs. Also, you'll have to have this solder paste or flux or whatever you want to call it. Of course, some solder. Then you'll have to have some wick if you don't have the more useful hot air gun to completely and easily remove the old thumbstick from the 360 PCB. Also, you'll have to get a screwdriver that can unscrew those proprietary screws that Microsoft uses. Also, a pair of cutters to cut the pins, the Arduino pins that will stick too much from the adapter PCB. Then a pair of I don't know if these are called pliers or tweezers. In Italian we call them pinze. So if you want to know the correct translation, you can translate pinze from Italian to English. Then you will also have to get these Arduino pins that are 2.54 millimeters breakable pin headers. Of course, Xbox One thumb grips, and obviously the new kind of thumbsticks, and they can be the classic type, so resistance based thumbsticks, or they can be also Hall effects. I tell you this because I've tried them both and both work just fine. There are no problems with calibration. Well, you'll have to calibrate the Hall effects one using a PC and a specific website that's called like hardware tester, something like this. I will link, of course, this in the description. But as I've said, they can be used both, so both are useful. And of course, if you mount the if you solder the Hall effects ones, of course they will probably last you your entire life. They both work just as well as I've tested. So first thing first, the controller is not painted like this because it's a Ukraine flag, but only because at the time of the repainting, these were the only colors I've had available. So this is the color of the controller. So first thing, you'll have to disassemble your controller the classic way. So you'll have to, of course, puncture this label and or remove it if you are able to with a hot air gun, and you'll have to dismantle the controller, let's say. Of course, another thing that you'll have to be able to use is the solder sucker, I think it's called. It's this thing over here, and it is of course useful when you don't want to probably take your whole day to disassemble and unsolder the old thumbsticks. So once you have completely unscrewed the back screws, you can then lift this back part, and you'll be able to see your PCB. Then you have to disconnect these motors as such. And finally, you'll be able to split the PCB from the controller assembly, just as such. Okay, there you have it. Now, with this part, of course, we will have to split the thumb grips from the thumbsticks, and first thing we'll have to do is desolder the LT and RT potentiometers if we want to freely access, of course, the potentiometers that are on the opposite side. So to replace the right thumbstick, you'll have to desolder RT, or I mean the RT potentiometer. Now, just to demonstrate that this mod works, we are going to replace the right thumbstick. So we'll have to heat up our soldering iron, preferably to something like 420 degrees, just to have this the margin of heat needed to easily dismount the solder. Also, arm yourself with the solder sucker, I think it's called. and just suck the solder off the board where the potentiometer is. So right thumbstick, right potentiometer. And just like that, you will be able to pull it out, just like this. And then, of course, disassemble the right trigger. Just like this, right here. After this, we can begin to suck away the solder under the right thumbstick. If you see that some solder is much more difficult to get melted, you can use this method where you apply some new solder and the old solder gets easier to get off. Now, after having the solder pretty much all the pins, you can then proceed with the solder wick or with the hot air gun. Now, just to speed up the process, I'm going to use the hot air gun to get this thumbstick off. To make the work of the hot air gun much easier, we apply some soldering paste on the pins. Then we preheat the entire board to avoid the warping. I'm using 400 Celsius as a temperature, and when the thumbstick is ready to be taken off, you can see the solder become much more shiny. We then start gently pulling away from the PCB the thumbstick with our pince. It became shinier on this upper part, as you can see. And there we go, just like this. Don't stay too much on the same points, else you're going to completely roast your potentiometer and your PCB too. Overheating can result in bloating of the PCB, so like small bubbles under the PCB upper stratus can form. After this, of course, you'll be able to fully clean your PCB from burnt flux, all solder paste. With some alcohol, you'll be able to clean these pads. Be sure not to rub them too much, else you can damage the pads themselves. On the other side as well, as you can see, flux has also came here. And there we go. Just make sure on the newer models of controllers, so the ones that don't have this kind of chip but have some different kind of chip, they have a small resistance under the, if I'm correct, under the right thumbstick. So don't rub the side with the solder joints of the thumbstick if it's not cool enough. Else you will rub also off this small resistance that is a 10K resistance. If you do that, then you'll have to take another 10K resistance and solder it across the 2 points. So now we have our original thumbstick removed. This one is the original one. Now to assemble the new adapted PCB, we'll have to do some work, some tedious work, so brace yourself for this part. Now we'll have to start assembling this PCB right here, and the fact that we can't order less than 5 PCBs can help us building them. So what we'll have to do is first make sure that the PCB is flat. This one is not flat, but it won't matter really. Then take the potentiometer that we want to build. I'm putting this on this PCB just because I know that this one is working 100% correctly. And we'll have to take this thumbstick and put it on the top part, well, the part that is that has written on it top. This is the first step. So as you can see, we are putting it through the holes and it should perfectly fit. This one of course won't fit just as well, just because as I've said, I'm reusing it. and the board isn't that flat, but I want just to demonstrate that it can work no matter what. At this point, what we have to do is, while pushing the PCB on this thumbstick, just to make the gap between the thumbstick and the PCB the smallest possible, we'll have to solder 4 of the points that we have on this PCB, that are the 4 anchor points of the thumbstick. This one, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So just help yourself with some clamp, something like that. Then heat your soldering iron, and let's do this first step. Be sure to make a perfect joint, like just like this, between the PCB and the potentiometer. Then proceed with the other 3. As you can see, we have successfully secured the PCB in place. Now, the first step after this one is to put the Arduino pins under this button right here. So, on the final version of the PCB, there will be also 1 and 1 under these 2 holes right here. Just wait a second. Ecco. This one and this one will be marked with 1, so that you can easily see what are the first pins to solder. And we'll have also to trim the pins to correctly fit the space between the button, that is right here, and the PCB itself. So it will be really a small space, but we'll have to make good use of that. So take your pins, then split them in one pin and 1 pin. Then, with much patience, you'll have to trim the right amount to make this black part completely flush with the PCB. So it shouldn't be like this, where there is a space, but this part should be completely in contact with the PCB, completely flush. To make this, we'll need some pliers, and we'll have to cut it just something like a millimeter from the black part. Just like this. And as you can see, there we'll have our pin. Now, of course, this won't be great for soldering, because we have to solder through this black piece. So we'll have to remove this. It's the only pin that needs removal, just like this, to make it perfectly fit. Then, also helping us with some solder, we'll have to make the most difficult part of the whole assembly. That is this one, where you will have to burn your finger and try to place this pin where it should be. And as you can see, it's, well, straight enough for our intent, and we can then proceed with the next one. These are the only two pins that won't have our black spacer, because they are the most critical ones. Not most critical ones. And just like this, and you might say, why are we trimming them if we then have to completely eliminate the black part? We are trimming them because the trimming can give us a flatter surface, so that we don't have as much play as the one we could get with the original point of the pin. As you can see, the point is slightly smaller than the shaft, let's say, of the pin. And then repeat what we have done before, just like this. We'll probably burn our fingers, but it's a small price to pay. Then make sure, of course, that these two pins don't make contact, just like this. Okay. If you're not sure if they are in contact, of course, use a multimeter with continuity setting, with the continuity setting. And just like that, our first and most difficult part is over. Then, what will we have to do then? The work from now on, it's really easy. We just need to put the pins in the right holes, and then use a trick to solder the pins. So for the triplets, our triplets are these triplets right here, that are the potentiometer parts of the thumbstick. So we'll have to split triplets from the pin lot, let's say. Then put these triplets through. It can be quite difficult. To make the thing much more easier, we'll slightly, and with your fingers so you don't end up completely ruining them, we can bend a little bit towards the center of the PCB these triplets, just like this, so that they are much farther from the Arduino pins. Then we'll have to push these Arduino pins through. Okay, just like this. And these are the most difficult ones to put in place. Then just take all your remaining pins that you'll need, and they are 6 pins, and split them from the pins assembly. Okay, now before we put the new pins, we can also start soldering, not the triplets. The triplets are the last one to be soldered, just because if you solder the triplets, the hole that, as you can see, is a sort of common hole, as you can see right here. This is something like a common hole, so it's a hole in well, that shares the same space with another hole. The solder that we place right here will also flow right here, and will completely block our triplet Arduino pins. So if you want to make sure that these pins are perfectly flat and completely adherent to the black parts of the pins, we have to make sure that this thing doesn't get in our way. So this soldering that we do doesn't get in our way. So that ones are the last ones to be soldered. We'll then, as I said, solder these remaining 4 pins that are the pins related to the button. Of course, as always, make sure that the solder completely adheres to the holes. Then we can finally put our Arduino pins in place and use the trick to solder it the fastest way possible to the PCB. Then just take another PCB and put it right over these pins. Once you get the first ones, the one with the triplets, you can easily put the other ones through the holes. Let's see. Up. There we have it. Now, as you can see, we have a sort of a pancake, or if you want, a sort of sandwich. Now we push down on this PCB to make sure that the black part of the pins completely adheres to the board underneath. Now, after we have pushed them, we start soldering, and we'll have to apply pressure where we will be soldering, of course. So for this pin right here, this is the most annoying one because it has a tiny hole that is half cut. We'll have to apply pressure on that part and solder it just like this. Of course, always applying the pressure needed, always making sure that the solder makes fully contact with the PCB traces underneath. And then we repeat the same process for all the pins. Just make sure that all the pins are correctly soldered to the main PCB, just because if you don't solder them well enough, they won't be able to detect your motion, of course, and you will have stick drift or unrecognition of the movements you make. Okay, so now we have our completely soldered board. Make sure that these black spacers are completely flush with the main PCB, because if they are not that flush with the main PCB, you risk problems with the controller. Your upper part will get to the stack, let's say, to the stack part, and won't come back. So to make sure, just do it once again. If you are not completely sure that the pin spacer is adhering. Then after this, I strongly recommend to check your your pins for continuity with the thumbstick that is on the top of this PCB. Of course, also remember to solder these triplets right here that we didn't solder before. So apply the solder in the points that are needed. For this is the reason that we have to use the small point soldering iron. So check for continuity between the pins and the thumbstick pins, then solder this back onto the main controller board. So we have checked for continuity. We can then reassemble the our PCB onto the main controller, and it will probably fit just as well as this one, just like a normal controller, as you can see. Even, I will say, even a little bit more straight than the original one. Okay, then always pushing the new PCB upwards to make sure that the new PCB stays in place. Okay, just like this. We'll have to solder back this one. This will be the most difficult part, of course. We have to make sure, completely sure, fully sure, that our PCB is making that contact with the spacers. So apply just the pressure needed. Not too little, not too much. Always solder before the 4 anchor points. And then look underneath if it's really flush with the surface or not. For example, this one seems pretty flush, but to be completely sure, we desolder, we push it from beneath, and we make sure that it completely makes contact, making double sure that this is the thing that happens. Then we use the same method as before. We take something to hold on our solder, and we apply it to the board. Of course, after the second anchor point is fixed in place, you can also let go your thumbstick when you solder it to the board. And just like this, we have completed our assembly. Now just place the old Xbox 360 thumbstick, thumb grip, and the new Xbox One thumb grip on the new, of course, thumbstick. Yeah, as you can see, the height is almost similar. Of course, it won't fit because there are also the pins to be trimmed, but just to make you see, if I push it underneath and make it completely in contact with the upper part, you can see that the controller is totally working, just as this original one. It won't stick, but it won't stick just because I've made sure that the spacers were completely flush with the Xbox 360 controller PCB and the adapter PCB. If they are not this flush, they can it can bring an angle to the thumbstick and then make it become stuck on the angles. Just to remind you. So what we'll be doing next, we're going to trim these pins so that they won't be of it won't be in touch with the lower part of the controller, just like this. Don't be afraid, because it won't damage the pads. If you don't pull, of course. Okay, so after trimming and having soldered back your potentiometer with the same technique that we used before, we can then proceed with the assembly of the controller itself. It doesn't have any spaces left from the adapter. And just like this, you have completely modded your controller. I'm doing just as a test video, this video right here, just to make you see that it works just as intended. So right now we have no drift whatsoever, and the sensibility is just as the original controller, even a little bit better, given the fact that modern controllers, modern thumbsticks, are a little bit less resistant to motion. So as you can see, this is the controller that we have modded before, and as you can see, this is the input I'm giving. Let's just have some fun. As you can see, it does not get stuck, and it works just as intended. My sensitivity is a little bit high. I'm using 7 as a sensibility, though as you can see, it doesn't suffer from any drift whatsoever, and it doesn't get stuck. There you have it.